Welcome to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. I'm here every Wednesday at 9 a.m. talking movies, new reviews, recommendations, lists. I just love movies, and that's what I do here. On today's show, I'm going to review recent movies, the drama, and They Will Kill You, share my ranking of the John Wick franchise, and close out the show with my 3 throwback recommendations for this week. I'll be right back, but first here's some movie music, starting with Rivendell by Howard Shore from the Lord of the Rings score. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Kicking off the show today, I'm going to review the new romantic thriller starring Zendaya and Robert Pattinson that released last weekend, The Drama. Written and directed by Christopher Borgli, a happily engaged couple is put to the test when an unexpected turn sends their wedding week off the rails. These 2 lead actors are really interesting right now and have been cast in a lot of great stuff. They're both going to be in Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey in July, as well as in Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 3 in December, so they have some incredible directors they've been working with, as well as Zendaya also had Challengers from a couple years ago that she was really strong in. Pattinson is a tremendous Batman, and I can't wait to see more of what he does. I thought this movie looked quite unique and had my attention. I'm not super into romance dramas, but it was very clear from the marketing that there was something else to this one. There's some thriller element and darker elements at play that take this beyond your average romantic drama. The director is Christopher Borgli, who I researched after watching the movie. I actually saw his last film from 2023, Dream Scenario, starring Nicolas Cage, that is a super unique and strange movie, also put out by A24, that I think has some elements in common with the drama. Dream Scenario has these more typical and everyday characters, Nicolas Cage as an older professor that has this phenomenon come into his life of people seeing him in their dreams around the world, and from there the story progresses and escalates, and I don't want to say too much more. I recommend Dream Scenario if you want a compelling, original, and odd movie, but it's an everyday sort of character that has this grabbing idea that makes it anything but ordinary and is able to tackle themes with it, and I would say Borgli pulls something similar off with the drama. You do get a lot of cliches of these romances and this wedding being planned. You have the scenes of the characters meeting, their first date, going through their relationship leading up to them planning their wedding, and getting all these plans in order, booking food and photos and all that. But if you've seen the trailer, something comes up between these 2 that makes the story escalate to make it a thriller as well. I think Borgli's script and direction and how he handles sort of blending these 2 genres was really clever. The build-up with the relationship between these 2 and how normal everything feels for the first bit until this reveal comes and this shift happens. It's something that comes out that sets this thing down a path of chaos, and once this happens and you see how the characters react to everything, you do get these debates and these different perspectives on the situation that tackle some interesting ideas. I'm not going to say what the reveal is here, but there's a mental health angle to this. There's this idea of people changing and discussing who people really are. It's a reveal that is certainly shocking, but how it gets taken to this extreme point and what it does to the relationship between these characters does a good job of commenting on ideas of forgiveness and who someone really is, and ideas of trust. The thriller aspect of this largely comes from these stressful scenes that follow the characters and their choices when all of this is going down, the characters debating these ideas and the way they try to figure things out and end up making it so much worse. The movie really sticks to this wedding idea and is able to really successfully integrate some dark comedy into these scenes. The humor that ties to the subject matter of this situation builds some brilliantly uncomfortable and funny moments that strikes that balance so well. There's some scenes where the wordplay plays a role, the performances of some of these side characters acting very upbeat next to the uneasiness of some other characters, the writing and direction and furthering the conflict while having these funny moments was really fascinating to see. The style and sense of humor of this movie and how it uses all its story elements is something really special here. And right along with the comedy is that incredible sense of discomfort and nastiness this story brings about. I think Zendaya and Robert Pattinson bring so much to this movie with their performances. Zendaya is this person that has elements of her past come into play and having some of this come out to someone she loves and trying to work things out. And then Robert Pattinson as this guy that finds this information out and is struggling with how to feel, and following him as things get worse, some of the things these characters do and all these details coming into play to make for such stressful scenes. And Pattinson plays this stress and destructiveness so well. The characters have these moments where things get wild, it gets pretty absurd, but also at the core of the story are real ideas, and this relationship you do care about on a real level, and I think both the crazier scenes and the more down-to-earth stuff with them and their care for each other, these scenes where you can see this divide between them, there's a great balance of genuine emotions and the wilder comedy that the script and performances really nail. As for any issues I have with this movie, I don't have any big negatives. I think this movie is extremely good at what it set out to be. I'm not a big romance drama guy, but those added elements of the thriller and the dark comedy certainly made this more interesting for me. With that thriller though, I did find it so uncomfortable at points with how effectively it builds these moments and situations for the characters that it's quite nasty and unpleasant. That is to be expected with this story, but it makes for something I don't enjoy as much personally. But I really enjoyed seeing something very unique that blends a lot together in a cohesive way. I love new experiences with movies. This is certainly that. If you want an original movie, this is one that will surprise and make you stressed. Zendaya and Robert Pattinson deliver wonderfully complex and captivating lead performances here. The romance drama and these ideas it's tackling with its setup are well integrated. There's a special sense of humor and brilliant comedic moments. It's quite nasty at points, but the script demands it. Go see the drama if you want something unique. I give it an 80 out of 100. I'll be right back on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale, but first here's some more movie music, starting with Harvester Attack by Hans Zimmer from the Dune Part 2 score. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Next up today, I'm going to review a movie that was released about 2 weeks ago. I would have reviewed it on last week's show, but we were on break, so I'll talk about it now. That is They Will Kill You. Directed by Kirill Sokolov, a woman, played by Zazie Beetz, takes a job as a housekeeper in a New York City high-rise, unaware of the building's history of disappearances. She soon realizes the community is shrouded in mystery. This is kind of a horror action comedy with Zazie Beetz in the lead. I know her mostly as Domino from Deadpool 2. I really enjoyed her action sequences in that movie, and I think Zazie Beetz brought a fun personality to that character. Here, the character finds herself at this point in her life where she's looking for work. She finds this job at this strange building that presents some strange elements off the bat. It has that creepy cult vibe with how the people here talk, very stiff and formal, most notably Patricia Arquette as a sort of boss of this place. I've seen Patricia Arquette most recently in Severance on Apple TV. That is an amazing show, by the way, that I can't recommend enough. And she is incredible there as this pretty complex character. But one big part of her is this cult mindset and how she is devoted to the institutions of that show. She brings a lot of that energy to her character here that makes you feel uneasy right away. And the character has some wild moments as well. The action and craziness gets going very early on in this movie. The opening minutes set up some of the backstory with how we got here a little, some details with the building and setting up other mysteries. The action, particularly early on, has some awesome moments. Like I said, Zazie Beetz can kill it in these action roles. Her character here is really tough and stands up for herself. She's really exciting to watch fight her way out of this place and figure out a way out of all this in very bloody fashion. The mix of martial arts fights here with insane gun work and bringing in the supernatural elements of the story into these fights had its moments where I was loving this movie. There's one fight earlier on where the choreography of the fights, the use of gore and these blood effects, the unpredictability and shock and style of everything was so much fun. The horror elements really shine through as well with some of the rules of the supernatural force and how the villains are able to use it. There's some effects that balance horror and comedy in a really enjoyable way. And the whole setting of this building with these several floors of people to go through, other complications with the plot coming into play, escape always feels very difficult, and when it maintains that intensity, I was really into this. I do like how it gives you some of the backstory of what's going on, although I will say with that, some of the relationships and the overall characters here are pretty weak. I like the idea of her being this person at this difficult point in her life that's looking to find a place she can settle, but there's some emotional beats it goes for and how other characters from the flashbacks tie in that drag things a little bit. The action slows quite a lot, and I just didn't get quite invested enough in the plot of this, so I got less enthused with it as it progressed. Other relationships within the building and the organization there had some interesting potential as well, but again, never really pulled me in. And when you get to the finale and all these rules coming in, where things really escalate, it got to a point for me where the silliness went too far, the action wasn't quite as exciting as in the start. This movie goes far with this, but with how silly it got, reached a point where I found it more annoying than fun. Those earlier sequences in the movie with the fights and the horror really got me excited, and I still think they're great and this movie has a lot of fun to offer. There's a strong cast here, but the characters and story got less engaging for me as it went along. The silliness of the finale crossed the line for me. I wish I loved this movie with how strong the start is, but it did lose me a bit. Still, if this seems like your kind of thing, you'll hopefully love at least some elements here, and maybe my issues going along won't bother you. Check it out if you have interest. I give They Will Kill You a 70 out of 100. I'll be right back on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale, but first here's some more movie music, starting with Challenger's Match Point by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross from the Challenger score. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Next up today, I got another action movie list. Today I'm going to rank the 5 movies in the John Wick franchise. This is the 4 main John Wick movies, as well as the spin-off from last year, Ballerina, starring Ana de Armas. This has been one of my favorite action franchises for years now. These are among my favorite action movies of all time, and hold some of my favorite movie fights, and it's such a cool world. Let's get right into this. I will spoil some things here and there. At number 5, I have Ballerina from the world of John Wick, the first of the John Wick spin-off movies. By the way, the spin-off for Kane, Donnie Yen's character from John Wick Chapter 4, is filming now. That should be out next year. Really interested to see where that goes and more of that character. I think there's a lot of cool stuff you can do in this world. From the first movie, you can tell this world doesn't have to be limited to Keanu Reeves as John Wick. He's a great lead, and Keanu brings so much to these movies, but the world is so detailed and well built. It was around before John Wick, it was around while he was retired. Why not do some more of these stories focusing on different characters and parts of the world, as long as there's something worth doing and it's not just a cash grab or continuing it for the sake of continuing it. And I would say Ballerina is neither of those things. This is a really cool spin-off. This one focuses on the Ruscaroma School, where many assassins in the world learn their skills, including John Wick and the lead character of this movie, Eve, played by Ana de Armas. This school was introduced in John Wick Chapter 3, and this movie takes place during the events of that movie. I think taking it to this school and focusing on this much younger and inexperienced assassin was a smart place to take a spin-off for this franchise. We've had 4 movies of John Wick as the legend, the Baba Yaga, the greatest assassin there is in this underworld. Now we're following a new recruit to the world of assassins, someone that is trying to prove herself and make her way through this school. I enjoyed seeing Eve's training early in the movie, seeing her improve her fighting skills in these simulated environments. It adds more depth to the world, seeing how these assassins are trained, and develops a key piece of the organization of everything. Also, seeing Eve's training highlights a key part of her fighting style, being this scrappiness and cleverness she has to rely on. This was very important in making the character and her fights feel different from John Wick's. The style and the quality of the fights from the franchise is still there. The choreography and incorporating guns and all these kinds of weapons is so electric, and the camera work and performing of these stunts has so much energy to them. This movie goes crazy with the amount of weapons she uses. The grenade fight is brutal and so unpredictable with how she takes these guys out. She comes up against enemies that are bigger than her, that she can't really flip around as much like John Wick can, but she is very resourceful and finds ways to get the job done, and it makes the fights really exciting. It's not just more of John Wick's fights with a different character. This is a different fighting style and way of taking out enemies that fits who the character is. Also with this character is this protector aspect they highlight with her. The villain of this movie is this cult that takes advantage of children that Eve has personal ties to. She is working in this criminal world, but her fighting these really awful people and being able to save some kids in her fight adds some emotion as well. The villains and the main leader are pretty forgettable. The dialogue about fate and destiny feel a little tired at this point in the franchise, and the whole revenge plot and some of the developments there are pretty underdeveloped and not as compelling. But the fights, Ana de Armas in this action role taking enemies out in so many ways, and the world of John Wick being developed and integrated so well here in this story of this different kind of character makes for an awesome way to continue this world. You get Ian McShane, Lance Reddick, and even Keanu Reeves as John Wick himself in a supporting role, but Eve always feels like the focus. The other parts of the world fit in naturally. If these spin-offs are given the care and meaning that this one had, I would definitely like more. At number 4, I have John Wick Chapter 2. This and Chapter 3 are basically tied for me. I love them both, and I think they both do things better than the other. As for Chapter 2, I definitely prefer the story of this one. John Wick has gotten his revenge at the end of the last movie. He's ready to retire again and leave the assassin world behind. And an old associate comes calling and forces him to repay a favor and do this hit for him. I think this was a very cool place to take this second chapter. The first movie already sets up the world so well with the Continental and the rules, but this movie gets into the government of the high table and the people hungry for power that makes for a different kind of villain. I like that this isn't a straight-up revenge movie like the first film. You definitely get revenge elements later in the movie when Santino tries to take John out and starting this contract on Wick's head that would be important for the rest of the series. And that ending and cliffhanger is so effective and sets up the next movie so well. As for the job John Wick is doing, killing this high-ranking member of the underworld, It's not the most complex job, but what it does in developing the world and the history, and then what it leads to later in the movie after John has done it, this story builds in a way that makes John seem much more in danger than even the last film. The story goes to more places. I like the Rome setting, the battle through the streets there with Common's character, and all the attacks they make on each other is so relentless. John Wick overall having to fight more deadly assassins, and not just henchmen that he can tear through, makes the fights more tense at points. You still have scenes where he's going through a bunch of guys. The museum shootout at the end is one of my favorites, and the whole setting of the museum with the stairs and walls and the mirror rooms is so captivating. Also, the catacomb shootout earlier in the movie with the shotgun is awesome. It's a dark and tight setting that's still dynamic, and you can see what's happening. And the scene where the contract initially gets put in place and he starts getting targeted, he does the pencil kills. There's so much amazing John Wick action. Other elements I really enjoy are when he's buying his gear from the sommelier and they're talking about guns and knives like a restaurant menu. The whole design and organization of the world, how there's so many roles and you can go through and find so many different kinds of people and jobs is so well continued here. Lawrence Fishburne is another strong example of that as the Bowery King, and that alliance with John starting here and that character is really fun. So this one always pulls me in. I do think the action in 3 and the amount of incredible sequences there makes it edge out Chapter 2 for me, but I really like the lore and flow of this story, and some of my favorite John Wick scenes are here. At number 3, I have John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum. Like I said before, this is one of the best John Wick movies for me in terms of just the action. I love the setup of this movie following the cliffhanger at the end of Chapter 2. John Wick killed a high-ranking member of the underworld, the contract on his head is huge, and he killed him on continental grounds, so he has been excommunicated and has no privileges, no sanctuary. So a lot of this movie is John Wick being hunted as the underworld comes after him, trying to get a big payday. That leads to so many awesome action sequences and fights that happen so frequently. It makes the chase aspect of this movie feel really intense. Even as these fights keep happening one after the other, they all feel very different and special. One of my favorite fights from this movie and the entire series is the knife shot fight. It's the small room that John gets cornered into with a bunch of guys, and they all realize they're in a room full of blades. They start throwing them at each other. John gets hit a few times, a bunch of knives into skulls and limbs, John fighting hand to hand with them. It's so chaotic, but choreographed with so much detail as well, that makes it not just nonsense. You can see John's skills and how he adapts to this. The choreography of that fight with John ducking and dodging, the counterattacks, the camera work and staging of this fight is brilliant and has so much going on. It's so fast and captures the tightness and intensity so powerfully. There's a ton of other great moments, the book kill in the library, the horse stable fight where John gets horses to kick guys in the head, the motorcycle and horse chase with the guys with the swords, all the hand-to-hand fights, the flips and holds, the use of guns and other weapons. The performers and choreographers bring these to life so well and have a lot of different kinds of action. This is some of Chad Stahelski and the team's best work in these movies in my opinion. I also have to mention the final battle at the Continental. John uses so many guns in larger spaces like the Continental lobby, but also has tighter areas and hallways. He uses a bunch of different guns. You also get Halle Berry here as an old associate of John, who gets an amazing shootout in the middle of the movie that incorporates dogs. Halle Berry's action overall here is incredible. The action in this movie is next level, and how much is here makes it slightly edge out Chapter 2. As for the story, it's not as strong here. John Wick being hunted is great, but the whole thing with him trying to clear his name, as well as Winston's side with the high table, I like the action it leads to, but those story elements didn't pull me in as much, and the story doesn't end, the cliffhanger isn't really strong. I feel like having this end in Chapter 4 allows for more action in another movie, but this movie doesn't make it feel like it really needed to be extended. I love that we got Chapter 4, but I don't think this story of John on the run needed to be 2 movies. Still, this movie kills it with the action, and that is highly important for me. It's a weaker story that gets a bit convoluted, but still a very strong chapter. At number 2, I have the original John Wick. This is one of my most rewatched action movies. It's always one I love to go back to, especially as Chapter 4 closed things out with this character, although there is an announced 5th movie. I like going back to when this world and story were a bit smaller, and seeing the start of everything. This one starts slow. You see John at this dark point in his life. He was able to retire from being an assassin years earlier to be with his wife, but he just lost her. He's in grief. He has a new puppy left by his wife, so he doesn't have to be alone. And then a group of criminals break into his home, attack him, and kill the puppy, and a revenge story is born. An assassin is reawakened. John Wick returns to the criminal underworld to get his revenge, and you get one of the coolest action movies of all time in my opinion. Keanu Reeves as this character is iconic at this point. I don't think he's a great actor with his line deliveries. His dramatic and intimidating lines very often sound forced out and phony, but there is so much more Keanu brings to this character to make up for it. His facial acting and his body language bring the intimidation. The way he gives these looks and shows this calmness makes him feel like a boogeyman, someone that will kill you if he sets out to do so. He shows rage and feels like such a force that cannot stop until he gets his revenge. Even without saying much, Keanu makes his character so captivating to follow. There's also a few scenes here of Keanu's emotional performance, like the scene where he's reading the letter from his wife and crying, that features some more straight-up strong acting from him. Also with Keanu is the action, the training he did learning these martial arts, learning how to use these guns to be able to believably perform a lot of these stunts is one of the coolest parts of these movies for me. Chad Stahelski and David Leitch directed this film. Chad Stahelski was Keanu's stunt double on the Matrix movies. David Leitch has been in stunts for a while. These two with Keanu made every action sequence in this first film memorable and exciting. The house break-in scene where the criminals come back to finish John off, and he takes them out is so cool as sort of an introduction, showing off John's skills and the level of skill in these action scenes. The choreography is dynamic, fast. The gun fu style and incorporating guns into martial arts fights is electric. What this team brought to all these movies, and being able to pull off some breathtaking fights in this first chapter. The club fight scene is one of my favorites of the series. Seeing John do stealth kills, then get revealed and have to start shooting, following his guy through this visually interesting club, crowded areas, quiet areas. The way the environments play into the fights and affects John's methods makes it so engaging as well. The visuals of this movie, and all these movies, are beautiful. The set designs and the lighting, especially in the club setting, but also these criminal hideouts and the whole underworld, are a great visual aesthetic of the world. As for the world, getting introduced to a bunch of these key players, Ian McShane's great performance as Winston, John's old friend and manager of the New York Continental, such a fun character with a compelling relationship with John. You see rival assassins to John, how the organization works with these different jobs, the guys that clean up the bodies, the employees of the Continental having a lot of personality like Lance Reddick's concierge character. You also get Willem Dafoe as an old friend of John that brings some twists in the action sequences as well. This whole world gets such a strong start here that makes this just one of my favorite cinematic universes as well, that feels like it has purpose existing as a cinematic universe. It's so detailed. This movie is close to being number one. It starts slow. The final action sequence is probably my least favorite of the movies. I just don't find that car chase very memorable. But most of this movie is so exciting. I love the lead character, the world, the amazing action. This is my kind of movie. My favorite movie in the John Wick franchise, though, is going to be John Wick Chapter 4. A great finale to this story with the character of John Wick that I really don't think needs a fifth chapter. This movie brings the saga of John Wick to a close with his return to the underworld, the consequences of him returning to get his revenge and getting dragged deeper in, and of course this contract on his head that has been going for the last couple of movies. This fourth chapter has a lot of the elements of Chapter 3 with that contract story. Chapter 3 didn't really close things, so John Wick is still on the run, trying to end this and be able to leave the underworld and rest again, not constantly being hunted and having to fight for his life. I think this movie is even better at what 3 was doing. You still have the threat of all these assassins coming after him. Everywhere he goes, there's threats. This movie heads to Paris, Osaka, some really beautiful new places for the franchise. I think the side characters John encounters are much stronger than the last film. Zero was a great character in Chapter 3, but he wasn't in it for too long. Here, Bill Skarsgård as the Marquis gets so many scenes where his villainous presence haunts everything. His arrogance and brutality. Skarsgård plays the nastiness of the character so well. He sends all these expert assassins after John that become really compelling characters in the story. Donnie Yen as Kane, who I mentioned is getting a spin-off film, is awesome. He gets some awesome fights, and his dynamic with John as being old friends, this dynamic with his daughter being threatened and him having to go after his friend to protect her. The character is fun, but there's a smart drama there too. Also playing into that dynamic is Hiroyuki Sanada as Shinazu, and his daughter Akira, played by Rina Sawayama, who runs the Osaka Continental. That seems to be a big part of the upcoming Kane film and where that left off. It's another interesting part of the world that develops more of John's history and provides new characters to the world that are compelling on their own as well. The tracker, played by Shamir Anderson, and his dogs coming after John is another antagonistic presence that isn't as interesting of a character, but has some personality and just gives John more to deal with in each scene. And then the action of this movie is spectacular. Chad Stahelski and this stunt team are geniuses with building these fights, and here they cook up some more awesome settings and situations to have these in. The Arc de Triomphe in Paris with the cars in the circle, and John and the assassins having to deal with traffic is so insane and so thrilling. The insane flight of stairs that John has to get up in the finale and where he ends up teaming up with Kane is one of the series' best shootouts. The Osaka battle is one of the most beautiful settings for one of these fights. The lighting and shadows, these colorful rooms. The glass room John fights in with the nunchucks is stunning. The Dragon Breath shotgun scene with the top-down camera angle is so unique and features a crazy weapon for John to use. This movie is full of the awesome action and non-stop threats of Chapter 3, but the villains and characters are a bit more engaging, and the finale of this movie being this duel where John Wick ends up dying after gaining his freedom. He can rest in a way that I think was the right move for the character. This is a tremendous action movie and finale to this series that completes this character's story, has some of the best action of the franchise, has amazing characters, it introduces more parts of this world with story potential without compromising its own story. This is the best of these movies for me. I'll be right back on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale, but first here's some more movie music, starting with John Wick Mode by Le Castlevania from the John Wick Chapter 2 score. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Closing out the show today, I'm going to give you my 3 throwback recommendations for this week. Every week, I like to take 3 movies I like to recommend and talk about them a little bit here. My first throwback recommendation for this week is 2002's Insomnia. Directed by Christopher Nolan, a Los Angeles detective, played by Al Pacino, chases a murder suspect in a remote Alaskan town. This definitely seems to be Christopher Nolan's most underknown movie. Maybe Following is, since that's his first and it's a very indie movie. But Insomnia is the movie he did between Memento and Batman Begins. It's not written by him. I believe it's his only film he didn't write the script for. It's a really strong small-town murder mystery movie with a brilliant lead cast. You got Al Pacino as this cop that heads to Alaska to solve this murder mystery and getting to know some of the people in this town, interviewing people and gathering information. It starts off not the most unique of a story. It feels like it's going to go through what you'd expect from a small-town investigation movie like this, but then you get these developments that pushes the story beyond what you're expecting. It has some surprises, and this is where I got really invested in the movie. You get a great Robin Williams performance here as this character that becomes a complication in this whole situation that gets more and more out of hand. Following Al Pacino on this, who gives a fantastic performance here, and seeing how everything is affecting his mental state and managing this information and secrets. There's some brilliant moments of acting and direction that show the turmoil of the characters in really powerful ways. This idea of insomnia. There's some beautiful shots with the lighting and capturing the haunting tone of these scenes. The setting of this Alaska town and the fogginess, the snow. The town has this eerie vibe that makes this mystery and these unsettling things feel even more creepy. The dynamic between Pacino and Williams and this complicated link between them is fascinating. Williams brings some of his dramatic intensity, but also some humor that makes the character really unnerving. And the idea of the sun not going down in the town is super weird too. The script builds these settings and has these ways of making you feel uneasy that Nolan brings to the screen really effectively. If you want to watch some Christopher Nolan movies leading up to the Odyssey, this is one of his smaller movies that has a lot of talent and provides an interesting story. I would recommend all of Nolan's movies leading up to the Odyssey. He's incredible as a director, but this is the one I'm recommending this week. Check it out. My second throwback recommendation for this week is 1995's Billy Madison. Directed by Tamra Davis, in order to inherit his fed-up father Brian's hotel empire, immature and lazy Billy Madison must repeat grades 1 through 12 all over again. The further Billy progresses, the harder his hated rival Eric Gordon tries to stop him. I don't believe I've talked about an Adam Sandler comedy on here. I'm not the biggest fan of his comedies, but I do throw one on from time to time and get some enjoyment out of them. And one of my favorites is Billy Madison. I think this is a pretty fun idea for a comedy. This grown man going back to elementary school with this business rivalry plot element. As with most of the Adam Sandler movies I've seen, this movie is really dumb, but you have to expect that going into it and want that experience from Sandler's comedies in what he's setting out to do here. If you find yourself in the mood for that, this is a fun one that is a role Adam Sandler is perfect for. He's so good at playing these men that act like children, so you get him as Billy Madison going back to school with these kids that he gets into these rivalries with, makes some friends, makes some enemies, does all this dumb stuff as he tries to make it through these grades so that he can inherit his father's business. There's some moments here that are genuinely really funny with how insane it gets in some of these lines. It gives you what it's promising, and there's also a bit of a strange underdog dynamic in this competition with this rivalry to Billy and Eric, played by Bradley Whitford, as this guy that challenges Billy. The finale and where this goes is insane. There's things that make no sense. If you can't stand Adam Sandler's comedies, this is one of the most wild in terms of the humor and where it goes with everything and its plot that I've seen. When I think of Adam Sandler comedies, though, I think of this one as one of my favorites. It's not a great movie, but for what it is, it's pretty entertaining. My third throwback recommendation for this week is 2016's The Accountant. Directed by Gavin O'Connor, as a math savant, played by Ben Affleck, uncooks the books for a new client, the Treasury Department closes in on his activities, and the body count starts to rise. This is one that had been on my watch list forever until I watched it a few years ago. This is an awesome action thriller starring Ben Affleck as this really engaging lead character. He's this brilliant man on the autism spectrum who is a trained assassin and also runs a business doing shadowy accounting work for criminal organizations. This movie presents him with this conspiracy he gets involved in that ties in so many cool elements of this character. The accountant is what he's known as in the criminal world and among his associates, but the guy is actually a super smart accountant, and you get some gripping scenes where that is the focus. The investigation of tracking some of this money, him writing out these calculations, the direction and script really authentically bring this into the plot, especially as it's the story of shadowy activities and conspiracies. Having that part of the investigation feels very important. As an action movie, there are some brutal fights. The shootouts and hand-to-hand fights are so gritty and intense here. You see this guy as this powerful mind that can pull off this investigation, but he's also a deadly killer that can handle guys trying to kill him. That tension of these assassins coming after him, trying to bury secrets. You also have this government side of the story with J.K. Simmons' character, and Cynthia Addai Robinson as this Treasury agent who is also on his trail. Anna Kendrick is also really strong here as the civilian who gets involved with Affleck's side of things. There's quite a bit going on in the story, but it's balanced really well. There's a strong mix of detective work, action, and feeling the danger of this criminal world. Affleck is awesome in the lead. He brings all these areas to the character. There's also a sequel, The Accountant 2, that I don't think is as good, but it has its own unique elements to offer with where it takes the characters and the format of its story. Both are worth watching. So this week, if you want an earlier Christopher Nolan movie with a tense mystery, watch Insomnia. If you want a ridiculous Adam Sandler comedy, watch Billy Madison. And if you want an awesome action thriller, watch The Accountant. I'll be right back to close out the show, but first here's some more movie music, starting with The Accountant by Mark Isham from The Accountant score. That's going to be it for me this week on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. I'll be back next Wednesday at 9 a.m. with some more movie talk. You can listen to past episodes of the show on YouTube, and be sure to follow my Instagram for updates and more content. Both of those are Not Quite My Tempo with Chris. New episodes will be up on YouTube after they air on WFNP Rosendale, so this episode will be up very shortly, and I will be back next Wednesday at 9 a.m. Have a good week.